Hi, and welcome to our webinar. I'm Sam Bogosh, CEO of Axial, and I'm joined today by Patrice Gutebel and Katie Scott. And we will be answering any and all questions. Plus, Patrice will be contributing a short demo just to give you folks a sense of, broadly speaking, what our product does. We would also be happy to drill down if there are folks that want to see specific product features. That's not a problem, and we can get really granular, but I suspect that most of the questions will be more of a business nature. And why don't we give people just another minute or so to join? It's just a minute after 3 o'clock. So maybe we'll start right at 3:03. That works. And thank you for joining. The other thing I will mention is that these calls are recorded and transcribed, actually. So if you're asking any questions, just bear in mind that it's both your question and the answers may be for public consumption. We won't say who asked them or anything, but we typically take the questions from the Q&A bubble that you'll see at the bottom of the Zoom application. And so you can type in questions there, as well as if you have just random stuff, you can use the chat box as well. So again, we will be giving folks just another minute to join, and I'll be right back with you. Thanks. Okay, I guess we'll get started. Again, I'm Sam. We have been doing these calls actually on a weekly basis, pretty much since we started the Republic offering, and it's been a great way to get a sense of the questions and concerns that people have. Also learn a bit more about, oops. Oh, sorry, I've got an incoming Skype call. Give me a moment here.
Yeah.
Oh, that was noisy. Okay, sorry about that. We are pretty much of a mind to just open the floor and see if there are questions. Those can be about the offering itself, or about our company, about our products, customers, pretty much wide open on that. Just in terms of general perspective, this last week has been really positive for us. We're seeing a lot more activity in the US and in Canada, which is very encouraging. There was a period in May where Europe had kind of woken up, and we were seeing a lot of incoming leads and orders from Europe, and also from India and Africa, which are handled through Neil Blake, who manages our European business. So it was the contrast between what was going on with Europe in May, which was already coming up out of the COVID crisis for many of these countries, and the US, where we were really in the thick of it. That contrast was really dramatic during May. I am happy to say that so far in June, it looks like the US is now in a similar upswing to what we saw with Europe last month. And so just the level of activity, new leads, demos, even orders, I mean, very, very positive. So that's just my 2 cents worth. We're kind of, right on the front lines of certain economic activity areas. I think, if you look at who is using media, it's a combination of the people you'd expect, like broadcasters and studios, and then a whole bunch of people that you might not expect. For instance, political campaigns are one example. Sports is another, which clearly is not recovering that quickly, but is starting to, as we see some of the plans take shape. And so we have, across all these different verticals, we have kind of a snapshot of what's going on as people come back from lockdown. The other thing is that I think a lot of people whose job it is to do creative work have realized that they have to be able to do their jobs, even if they have to from home, or with all kinds of dislocations possible. COVID probably was the biggest proof point for that, but actually all the Black Lives Matter protests that have happened in the last week or two have also, I think, been an eye-opener for people. They think, wow, it's not just pandemics that would cause me to have to rethink my work arrangements or schedules. It might be, social unrest or other, natural disasters or another category. So historically, these things were the province of what's called disaster recovery. Like people would think about their data and think, I have to have it backed up somewhere. And so I would say beginning maybe with the Y2K brouhaha, people really started to think about having a place to back up all of their data. So disaster recovery, DR, was a really big buzzword and still is. But now it's a little more nuanced than that, because just having an extra copy of your data somewhere else doesn't actually let you get your work done, right? If you're in the media, you have hundreds of terabytes or even petabytes of content. You have to find a way to work with that content wherever your team is located. And if your team is right there, they can obviously be super efficient and connect up with high-speed networking and so forth. But if their team has to go home immediately, as in the case of a lockdown, you have a sudden engineering problem of like how to adapt all those people and all that workflow to the new circumstances. So we have published a really nice case study with one of our customers, American Public Television, which outlined how they were able to do that using our software. And we're actually holding a webinar on the 18th with not only Jerry Field from APT, but also another of our customers, Scott Salick from Longevity in California. So we'll sort of have both coasts represented. APT is more of a broadcaster, Longevity is more of a brand, and Jerry and Scott both have very complementary, I'd say, styles. So it should be an interesting event, and we will put out a link for that in the chat box. So I see there are a couple of questions so far.
Yeah, actually, one of the questions is about the collaboration with Backblaze, which I think is also tied into this event, if I'm not
mistaken. It is indeed. So, yep,
so
absolutely.
maybe we can describe a little bit more. So I'll dive into a demo later on, but basically we have been around since 2012. We have shipped products since 2013. So we've been around prior to this whole we need to work remote aspect. And the disaster recovery was still a prominent part. And this is where we partnered with not only tape manufacturing and archiving companies such as Zendata and Archiware, but also with other cloud partners. So we do have integration with S3, Amazon or Wasabi. We have also some Azure integration. But more importantly, the first cloud integration we've done was with Backblaze. And in fact, Longevity, who will be part in the next event that Sam just talked about, was the first customer of Axial using not only Backblaze, but also the Fireball, which is their NAS shipment. So instead of you having to pay or wait for the upload, you simply get a NAS from Backblaze, insert all your files, send it back to them. They put it in their cloud, and we have a special source code in Axial that will relink what exists in Backblaze and update everything into our database, so you can then safely retrieve the files at a later time or everything else. So that's the integration with Backblaze. So you can pack them in the cloud, or we can relink them if you did send the files in another fashion than Axial to Backblaze. So I think this answers the question. And of course, we will have the link and much more details in an upcoming webinar.
Yeah, I will post the link here, because you can actually sign up for that webinar, and it'll be quite different from this because it'll be more the customers talking. I'll be on there to represent Axial, and there'll be someone on there from Backblaze, but probably 80 or 90% of the conversation is going to be Scott and Jerry getting into all the wild and woolly stuff they've had to do to adapt their workflows to remote work. Go ahead, Patrice, sorry.
Yeah, so that was pretty much it. I'm just hoping I answered the question about Backblaze. We have another question which relates to how we package our tools. And basically, the question is, are you planning to package your AI and machine learning tools and selling licenses like web services? So,
Yeah. So yeah.
yeah.
So the answer is over time, yes. Right now, we're more of a solutions company. We do have some core IP on the machine learning side that we think is going to be increasingly valuable, but probably today, 80 or 90% of what we do is kind of in the presentation layer or how that is used by the customer. And in fact, we plug in a number of third-party AI engines, everything from Microsoft's video indexer to Speechmatic's transcription tools. Those are all available options in our ecosystem. So we're kind of less at the API level and deep tech, if you will, and more at how does the rubber meet the road for people who have a lot of media. And that probably the best evidence of that is that as time goes on, while we are doing some significant ML work in-house, the number of choices that we offer to customers is only growing. So we're on a large bid right now in Asia, which will involve integration with Amazon's recognition services, for instance. We also have some requests for Google's equivalent to Amazon's and Microsoft's tools. So my guess is that in a year, it's quite likely that we will support all three, as well as some niche vendors who do very specific things. For instance, we already have an agreement with a company called Really that does just sports highlights. And they can run their engine on-premise or in the cloud, but they focus on, if you give them raw footage of a sports event, they can show you like where the goals are, where the highlights are, basically a whole range of sort of prominent tags in the timeline. And they're able to do that in a very hands-off automated way. So we would expect that there are going to be other very specific engines. Another example might be for nudity, for instance, to make sure that content is not presented to minors or to places where nudity is really frowned upon, like say Saudi Arabia or something. So you should be able to buy these services a la carte, and there's no way that one company is going to be able to package them all up. The one instance where we have seen someone try to do that, there's a company called Veritone that's publicly held and is currently worth about $300 million. They're trying to aggregate all these different services and provide it at an enterprise level for large clients. But the reality is that their stuff is very expensive, both to get into in terms of upfront costs and then ongoing operating costs. We think it's very uneconomic. Now, as a speculative stock play, I have nothing to say as to whether Veritone is a great thing or a terrible thing, but that's not the business model that we see. We think that the broadest appeal in the market is going to be for an open architecture where people can essentially adapt their workflows and adapt their business choices to whoever has the best capabilities at the best price at that time.
Yeah. And to be fair, you have so many libraries now that are coming up, especially for vision APIs, or all this kind of recognition that a computer will do, such as facial recognition, object detection, object classification, and so on. This is called the vision API. And you have so many libraries out there now available, open source. There is no way that we can just go in and start to package something to sell like that Veritone is doing. Somebody is just going and they're all going to do something that will be special sauce to them. What we want to be is the platform to find and search media based on the AI tagging that you are aggregating for yourself. That being said, though, we are trying different approach as well. So something much simpler that will not necessarily require a server like Axial. So you spend $10,000, maybe less, and you get a server where you can index all your media. This is what Axial does, and you get some tagging and you can find your clip easily. Now, not everybody needs this kind of server, so we are trying some freemium aspects. So we have a free app available both for Mac and Windows that will just do transcription. That's the only goal, to do transcription. No nothing else. And I have seen some people using it, for minutes in their meetings, other to just get subtitling ready. So they just get everything and they correct it and they have the subtitles ready. So it goes from a wide range and it's used and other things. So just to answer the other question that came in, which was what would be some future product plans using the platform we have built. So in addition to adding more AI engines, just like Sam described, we are also looking at this lower end where we actually make our money more in SaaS model pricing than the CapEx model that we have for Axial connector and our other products, softwares. We want to add new features that are very high demand, such as speaker detection. That's great. Now I have my minutes, I have all my meetings, but I don't know when Rosie or Jackie or Bob said something. So we need to actually know who said what in these minutes. That's a number one request. So people are appreciative of the cost, people are appreciative of the technology, but they still need more. The same will be true for interviews in TV or in B-roll, when you have a producer talking to a contestant on a TV show and stuff like that. So this is another example of what we can bring in addition to more targeted AI engines for the client, which of course will come at a higher cost. If somebody comes and say, I need the specific this Malaysian language in the Amazon engine, well, this is something that we can definitely do and charge to make money off.
Yeah, and so actually, there's another question here from Vishnu. I guess you sort of answered that.
Oh yeah, that was about the future product plans. Yeah.
Future product plans. So let me talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Right now, we feel like we have actually a pretty good platform between our core Axial AI product and then Connector, which is the workflow tool that accompanies that. We feel that that's a pretty complete offering for our customers. I'd say 90% of the requests, or 98% of the requests that come in, we're able to address with those. There are some specific feature requests that are quite common that we see again and again. So at this point, the biggest challenge we have is sort of blocking and tackling through those feature requests. And I would say that, and Patrice, maybe after you can add to this list, but the things we're hearing the most in terms of these requests right now are probably the ability to extend out from one data store to multiple sites with kind of a hybrid cloud approach. That's very big. I think we're seeing requests for more extended file types, for particularly at the high end, for people who do a lot of rendered video sequences. Those are often done frame by frame as a series of images rather than as a single linear video. And so to handle those formats, we probably will be extending the product in that direction. So that's kind of another vector. And then I'd say the third thing that we're running into is ability to support more applications natively. So actually this week we're announcing support for Avid's Media Composer, which is Avid's the company I used to work for. They have an editing package called Media Composer that is still in use at many of the largest studios and broadcasters, and is, in fact, the majority of the movies that win Oscars are edited in Media Composer. So up till now, a lot of our focus has been on Avid, on Adobe Premiere Pro, and also on Apple Final Cut Pro 10. But now we're going to be extending that and having an interface for Avid Media Composer. There are other applications that make sense kind of in that thread, things like the other Adobe applications like InDesign, Photoshop, After Effects, and then also some new editing applications that are pretty interesting, like DaVinci Resolve. So if you take those three kind of lines of inquiry, if you will, kind of more configurations, more data types, and more software native interfaces, that's probably going to keep us busy for the next year or more. And I think it's clear from the customer requests that if we do those things, the core platform that we have will be significantly wider in its appeal across the creative industry. So with that, maybe unless there are more immediate questions, maybe Patrice, if you wanted to do a a brief demo, although I think there's one more question that
Yeah,
came
there's
in.
one more question that I
Yes,
think
yep,
we should probably
okay,
answer.
yep. So, oh, another one too. All right, do you see the Axial platform being used beyond media and production one day, or do you think an acquisition would occur at that point or before that? Very good question. Um, the definition of what is media and production is already broadening a lot. Like if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, well, it's mostly broadcasters and movie makers, but there's a few other people that do this. If you look at it today, it's all these diverse categories like universities, sports teams, churches, YouTube creators. That whole world has sprung up, and it's not really the traditional media world. It's much broader than that, right? If you look at a brand like Patagonia or Coca-Cola, they're both customers of ours. They're not media companies, they're brands, and they have needs for video because, particularly in the age of COVID, but even right before that, video was a bigger and bigger percentage of the means of communication with their marketing audience and with their customers. So I guess we see that trend continuing. So more than anything, I would argue that we're going to be of the media world for the foreseeable future, but that the media world is kind of eating the internet, if you will. It's eating the real world. I think something like 80+% of the internet traffic, that exists is video, and it's 20% and rising. The percentage of storage that is purchased worldwide is also for video and media. So that number could go from 20 to 30 to 50% over the next 5 or 10 years. And so we would still be a media company, but why not use video when you're annotating a spreadsheet, right? If you've got some commentary about how to use the spreadsheet, if video was an easy enough to use data type, you would just have a little inset in the spreadsheet with you talking about, oh, that sells for this and this sells for that. Or what about, I don't know, just online editorials. A lot of written content could be accompanied by vlogs and podcasts. It is already happening, right? So the dividing line between non-media and media is blurring on an ongoing basis. There are certainly other applications for this, areas like security applications, uh, things like driverless cars, where you've got a lot of video content and live streams and so forth. But I'd say for the next couple of years, our focus is going to remain pretty tight, and we're more riding the growth in the underlying demand space than we are trying to look for other verticals at the moment. And then final question for now, what are the languages and services you're using to build the Axial platform? For that, I would probably hand that to you, Patrice. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what we're using.
Yeah, no, definitely. Maybe I can share my screen and just briefly, as I talk about what we are using, just do a quick demo at the same time for everybody else.
Great.
So in terms of backend, what we use is PostgreSQL and Elasticsearch. So that will be the database technology. And we simply use normal standard Laravel/Ember for the web interface that we use. So Axial is software that you install, and that its goal will be to index the content of your drive. It can be direct attached, it can be on the network, it can be on the cloud. Whatever you want to be indexed in Axial, you can do that, and you access it from the web browser. This is huge because it means that if I simply do a couple tweaks in my setup, I can have access to my media storage from anywhere. So we do a lot of reverse proxying, which means I have a server in the cloud that is going to serve the information of the computer of running Axial, and I do not expose my computer, I do not open my firewall, I still remain safe. It's just an in-between layer. One example, the other will be VPN, or some people will just have a whitelist of IPs that they let through for their IP addresses. But basically, it's just standard HTML. And once I log in, I will simply access the folder structure that I have in my drive. And the way I will add more files will simply be to copy over or upload or render new content straight inside a folder that is being indexed in Axial. So everything that I will have in here. In my example, I'm using a laptop, so I'm just indexing this folder, but anything can be indexed. If I add new files in here, Axial is going to automatically pick it up, will automatically render a proxy. I can even scrub through the thumbnail to identify the video quickly. And it can be photos, it can be audio files. And the goal is really to let the person, not only can they, by clicking on the video, I can have the preview, and I can post tag directly on the timeline. I can say, okay, the person is struggling, is tossing the drive here. So mark in, mark out, tossing the drive. And you can see in the back, this person in the green shirt is doing that. You'll figure it out. Is doing that, and post my comment. And I have this marker associated right here. This is going to become searchable. Same thing on the right side here. This is also user-created tags that I can then just go in, update. So this was shot in New York, and I can have a checkbox. I can have multiple select, producer movie Sam. I can have drop-down menus, text, and even date. So I can say, for example, this was shot March 1st. Let's say it was shot March 1st. Save. And now all this information will become searchable. But that's the boring way. That's the old way. That means that somebody has to go. Now, would it be neat if I can do it automatically? So first of all, imagine that I'm doing that, and now I can know every video that will be produced by Sam, or any videos that were shot in New York or take place in New York, just because somebody spent the time to do it. Imagine searching for that very quickly. I'm going in and say, find me all the videos that were approved by Patrice, for example. And I can have much more than that. I can just go in and add more fields as I need, or I can just enter keywords right here. And now I know everything that has been approved by Patrice, and I search across thousands, millions of videos and find my entries. Now imagine if I do it automatically. Imagine if I go here and suddenly in my video, I know who appears in what and when. So I know where Benedict Cumberbatch appears in this skit. So each blue area will show Benedict Cumberbatch, not outside. I know what appears in the video. You have the electronics here, it will show me the TV. Or you have the transcript. Right here, the transcript being shown. So what is being said? All of that not only has been applied automatically, but now becomes searchable. So I can search across, again, many thousands of clips very quickly what is available. Now, in terms of AI technology that we use, this where you, for my demos, I typically use Microsoft. Why? Because it gives me everything, transcript, face, object. But we do have the possibility to analyze the video with different AI engines. So the Axial Speech is our own speech-to-text processor, and we are also selling that as a service, also in the freemium, that it comes by default. So people can already have the transcript available for search. Speechmatics is a gold standard for speech transcription. We are adding Amazon. We can add a really, I think I have, if I'm not mistaken, if I check a football clip, I can see, I'm looking for the second quarter. Now I can see Really AI, which is the other company that we did a proof of concept with that Sam mentioned earlier. I will know when the quarter starts, all the replays, so I know what is important. You will see all the replays happening, or when the score changed, so I can find the score by, for example, 6-0, 7-0, so I know it's a touchdown right here. And here I am, and you will see when the score changed, and I can go back, create another toss, and another touchdown. So I know exactly what appears. So isn't it neat? Now, instead of watching the game that can drag on for hours, I know exactly when the score changed, I know when they have replays, and it's also listen to the crowd. So if the crowd start to go wide, it will know that something important happened, and it will mark it. So I know everything, and it becomes searchable. And that was Axial, and we are right at the top of the half-hour mark. So I'm going to stop a moment and just see if we have any other questions, and let Sam conclude the call. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, the backend is all Elasticsearch. The whole front end here use full text Elasticsearch. So that's very scalable and a proven technology. So we can even include, for example, basic English grammar. So if I do a search on Dodger, it will still find me Dodgers with an S. So we use it will understand basic English grammar. And with that, Sam, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrice. It probably should also be mentioned that our companion product, Connector, actually uses primarily Java. And so it's kind of a complementary piece, more organized around kind of process automation rather than UI and search. But it's also pretty robust code. So let's see, with that, since we aren't, I mean, where there's no hard stop, we're happy to take a few more minutes if there are additional questions. And as mentioned before, we'll be doing this again next week. So with that, by the way, it makes sense for me to put out our contact info. Feel free to follow up directly. I'm Sam at Axial.ai, AXLE.ai. Patrice is Patrice at Axial.ai. Katie is Katie, Katy, at Axial.ai. So we just very simple first name. Luckily, we're not a big enough company yet that we have multiple people with the same first name. Although we did have a couple of Inez's, but one of them spelled Inez a little differently. So it was all right. So far, we've avoided having to use last names or any other descriptive info in the emails.
How do you plan on the, go for it?
Oh, yeah. How do you plan on diversifying revenue in the future, i.e. 5 to 10 years from now? That is a tough one. I think the two things that we see most clearly are that, as I mentioned before, media is growing very dramatically as a part of the economy. And that if we ride that, we may not need to diversify for a few years. But 5 to 10 years is a long time in this business. Probably the biggest single thing that I would say is that we're likely to keep extending down market. We've already done a little bit of that experimentally with Ascribe.ai, which Patrice mentioned. This idea that you can have freemium products that people can just try out, download at no cost, I think that's really, really compelling. And so I would look for us to keep adding functionality and tools at that level, which will give it, the number of creators that do this kind of work worldwide is in the millions. There are literally millions of people that work with video. And if you extend that out to mobile devices, it's tens or potentially even hundreds of millions. So we still have a lot of work to do. We're not going to be down at the pure consumer level, but we may be at the prosumer level over time. And again, Ascribe is our first attempt at that. So to the extent that I can speculate on where we're going with this, it's all about media creation more and more broadly defined. And finally, do you see Axial becoming a large company that stands alone for a long time, or is acquisition more of a goal? We are amazingly on the fence on this question. Basically, our preference is to grow this into a big company. We know this will take time. We know that we are looking for patient investors because we're not going to grow at 300% a year. We're going to grow at tens of percent a year, right? And maybe there'll be some years where we grow at 100 or 150% per year. That would be awesome. But our concept is to follow this path and to execute really, really well and continue to be capital efficient. Like the fact that we've only raised, prior to this Republic round, we've only raised less than $380,000 of capital, and yet we did over $850,000 of revenue last year. We consider that like a really positive sign because it means that we can raise small chunks of capital, not dilute out the base and end up, having to find some way to exit or do an IPO, but we can build year on year. And so I guess our goal is to continue doing that and to build a really significant company. That being said, we could absolutely be approached and have been approached in the past to be acquired. And we're always on the lookout for those. If there's a deal that makes sense and somebody has a compelling reason why, 1 + 1 = 3, then we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't pay heed to that. So we're basically constantly evaluating both of those, but our preference is to stay independent. And with that, I think we can wrap it unless there are any other questions sort of going once, going twice. But again, we'd be delighted to hear from you. And this has been a really good call this week. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.